Hello and welcome to Pat O'Keefe's World of Curiosities. And tonight's guest is a very magical person. There are a lot of people who are in this field, but she truly does walk the walk. She's an author. She's a natural medium. And my husband asked, what is that? And I said, that's someone that's born with the gift. They haven't simply, traveled with someone else, learning from them, although that can be a good thing to do. A natural medium, I always say, is like a natural tennis player. You can always learn to play tennis, but those who are born with that gift always seem to have a deeper connection with it. And that can be any gift. Now, she's a Reiki master, and I am too, but I was so impressed. I am a Reiki master in only one path, and here she is in 6 different schools of Reiki. So definitely walking that path of healing for others. She's an intuitive, and she's a sound healer. And when I say intuitive, she uses that in everything from what I was able to find out about you, Sally, and everything you do. You're a druid, tarot reader, rune practitioner, death educator, spiritual doula, and there's so much more. But Sally, could you tell me what I have left out?
I would just add that I am an elemental witch and that I also am a practitioner of Seidr, which is a Norse form of witchcraft.
Now, what differentiates that particular form of witchcraft? Because there's always a core difference. What is it?
Sure. Well, it does have a lot. Runes are a piece of it. So you first kind of have to have a knowledge of working with runic magic before you can step into Seidr. Seidr is a trance meditation, and it usually encompasses some kind of sacred sound. So it's called Galdr. Galdr is a sacred singing. So when I said that I was a sound practitioner, sound healer, I use my voice primarily. So I've worked with my voice as a healing tool and in my magical practices for over 20 years. So Seidr is, you go do most of your magic in a deep or a light to medium trance state, which means that instead of setting up necessarily the big circle that you're working in, you might be doing it, most of it inside of your head, in your mind. You might have props like using a shawl or something to cover your head to make it so that you can block out the outside world. I don't really have to do that. I don't teach Seidr very much because it's a pretty advanced teaching. And I tell people they have to really understand runes and a few other different Norse practices before they jump into Seidr. So not a lot of students get to that point.
It's interesting because when you were talking about how you practice that, that's actually, I call myself an energy witch, because it all happens in my head. Like, all of the props and things I just don't use. They're nice to have. And the only music I seem to connect with is one that has that driving beat that puts you into that trance state. So this is really, really interesting. I've got to ask you, okay? And this is falling off my questions, but what scares you? And the reason I'm asking this is because somebody with your background, have you ever encountered something that put you off a little bit, that made you think, I really need some help with this?
Oh, I definitely have encountered things that I need help with. My sister is also a practitioner, a teacher, a witch, an herbalist, a healer. And our great grandmother was our first teacher. So we've done this our whole life. So when something is more challenging, we often work together, or sometimes even in teams with other people. I would say that maybe not the scariest, but one of the experiences that I had that really stands out is that years ago, it was during my regular work day that I got a message from one of my clients who lived in Concord, New Hampshire. So she was a ways away from me. And she told me that her daughter had bought a doll at a yard sale, and that when she bought it, it was really unusual because this woman that she described as being someone who she thought looked like a gypsy. That's how her description was. Tried to buy the doll too, and for her daughter not to buy it. But her daughter really wanted it, so they bought the doll, brought it home. Shortly after bringing it home, multiple things happened, including a really bad arm break. And this was within days. And so when she called me or texted me, I said, well, send me a picture. I'm working. And when she sent me the picture, I was like, holy crap. And then I was like, okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take the doll. I want you to take it out of your house. I taught her how to put it in a box, surrounding it with protection and the things that she would have in her household. So some herbs that she had and some salt and different things like that, and binding the doll. And I said, and you're going to leave it there until you can send it to me. You are not going, don't go near it. And I wrote to my sister immediately and was like, hey, I have to talk to you about this. By the time that I was talking to my sister, I looked down and I had a huge lump on my arm. So I have a protective tattoo on the same arm, and I had like a ganglion cyst that appeared out of nowhere. In the time that I had received the phone message with the picture, and then had to get rid of, send it to my sister. And I immediately knew what it was. I didn't think I'd have to do protection on myself just from seeing a picture. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I knew I would when I received it, but I didn't think that even getting the image, I would need to do protective work on myself. But because I have, protection that's working all the time, it was minor what happened to me. But that doll, we ended up having to destroy and bury and do some serious magic to take care of whatever was in it. And I've had other doll experiences that weren't bad. That was a bad spirit. Whatever was in it was really bad.
Let me mention, too, if people want to know more about Sali and her background, she wrote this amazing book. I haven't been able to read it yet, but I have read a synopsis of it, and it sounds absolutely amazing. And this is really where you go into depth, isn't it, about your background?
Yes. Anybody who really wants to know my bio should read this. I will say also that when I wrote Jump Girl, it was really just a memoir, but people who come to see me for appointments come with that book underlined and highlighted and pieces of paper shoved in it, because the things I talk about are things that also have happened to them. And now they have an understanding of what it was, because I don't just tell it from the story of being that child or that 20-year-old. I tell it through both sides, being this person who has practiced this. I'm 54 years old, so I've practiced this for a very long time. And that's in that work too. So it's really helpful for people who are starting out, because you'll probably identify a lot of things about yourself and understand what they are.
Now, you've written actually several books, and I'm going to put those up. Which one is the new one that is actually coming out, isn't it, shortly?
Yes, Tarot as Storyteller comes out on June 10th, and it is a book on psychic development, mancy, and reading the web of fate. So instead of just memorizing cards, really learning how to read as an intuitive or a psychic, and seeing that all of those signals and symbols. I even tell people that you could play with your grandma's birthday card collection that she's got saved in some drawer, or the cards from, relatives have sent her. If that's all you had for cards, you could still use something like that in divination. And I think, like my grandmother, she used playing cards. And she actually did divination, and she played solitaire all the time, but she wasn't always playing solitaire. It was just more hidden. It was something like she worked with people under the guise of selling worms and having good cooking, when they were also coming to her for her to talk to their dead and for her to help them with their problems and those kind of things. So cartomancy through playing cards was my first experience with divination. And a lot of my psychic background as a child was involved working with playing cards, whether it was memory games or like I'm an amazing rummy player. And mostly because I can see how long I should wait and where the good cards are coming. Like, and that was all developed as a form of psychic gameplay when I was a kid. So I try to teach in that manner too, not so much with rummy, but with the idea that, you know, that this is should be enjoyable in a game, and you're telling a story, and you're telling a story about a person. So when you can start to use the cards that way, it opens your mind a lot. I also have tips for entering into a more relaxed trance-like state when you're doing reading, how to set the stage for yourself using both solar and lunar phases and things like that as well.
Now, we're going to exclude the one you just talked about, which is the newest one. Of the other 3 books, which one is your favorite?
Yeah, The Path of Elemental Witchcraft. It is, first of all, it's huge. It's like 570 pages, and maybe it's 540 pages. I think I wrote 570, and it's 540, but it is, well, it was based on my Book of Shadows for years. And I should say Books of Shadows because I have like ridiculous amounts of notebooks and piles of paper and whatever. And it is such a powerful tool that if somebody actually starts at the beginning of the book and moves through it all the way, they will have a really great practice. And it's a lot of psychic teaching, you know, but also working with nature, working with elemental beings. You know, I have had so many amazing encounters with elemental beings and fairy folk, and you know, and I teach people ways that they can interact with the world like that as well. But I also teach about things like geomancy, working with ley lines. It's a really fabulous book. And actually what I'm doing next week is I'm going in to finish, we just are turning it into an audiobook. And it's been out for a couple of years, but it's done so well that they decided they wanted to make an audiobook of it. And it's also, this summer is going to be broken down into 4 books, and then turned into Spanish.
Nice, and congratulations on that, Sally. Now, you got so much going on. What is, of all the gifts that you have, what is your favorite gift? And usually it's the one that we've had with us longest, but it doesn't mean that it has to be.
I have such amazing relationships with spirits, and I am in such awe of the length that spirits go to, because my spirit communication, like I see clients 2 days a week. I see people for psychic readings, and I see people for spirit communication, both online and in person. And when I'm working with somebody, the level of connection I can get with spirit communication is pretty awe-inspiring. I know how people love someone else. I know, you know, like not just in, oh, they've told me this, but I get to experience that feeling, you know, I get to be like, wow, oh my God, your dead person loved you so much. And I also get to continue to have these relationships with my own dad, you know, that is such a blessing, because when somebody dies, while it changes its direction, like I still talk to my dad all the time, probably more than I did before he died. Do you know what I mean? Because it's an instant call. So I can't choose between the two.
I could understand that. Your first experience, was it psychic or was it mediumship? The one that you first remember?
I don't remember not having psychic experiences because I think the fact that my sister's a year and a half younger than me, and we always tell people we were meant to be twins, but I'm impatient and she likes the slow road. But because of that, my childhood, first of all, my parents were like hippies, and we had a very free childhood. So we spent a lot of time in our own experiences. So I can't differentiate a time when I wasn't having psychic experiences. Like I remember knowing things about, you know, like my parents' friends that there's no way that a 4-year-old would know. I remember though, when I was a kid, this one sticks out as kind of funny, is that, I mean, I was born 1971. So my parents didn't have a color television at first when I was really little. And I would argue with my mother when I was like 3 or 4 years old and tell her that Richie Cunningham had blue eyes. And she would tell me that, so some people don't know who Happy Days are, but for those older people, you'll know. And she would be like, there's no way that you can tell what color their eyes are. And I'm like, I know, I see them. And, and yes, his eyes were blue. So, it's kind of that, those little things that stood out, but they were just normal. I didn't even realize when I went to school and they started talking about, make believe friends, I just figured the teachers were talking to other people because the spirits that I saw, my sister could see, my grandmother could see. So I knew they weren't fake.
What is one of your most memorable readings that has really stuck with you and made you realize that this is your path?
Oh, I have had so many amazing readings. I think I'm more in awe of the spirit communication readings because it's easier to be in awe of somebody else than it is of yourself. That's a little weird. But I have had spirits. I just had a spirit that I did spirit communication for. And while he was telling me about himself, one of the things that stood out as really interesting is that he told me that, he showed me that he had a white patch on the side of his head. And so I said that to his wife. I was like, so he had a white patch on the side of his head and he had really black hair. So I was like, it was like something that had been with him since birth. And I was like, but that's where his tumor was. And it was. And they didn't know. He went his whole life. And then in his like 40s or 50s, he ended up with a tumor, and he'd had the tumor his whole life. But it was such an interesting, specific thing that he was able to show me this random thing about his head, like that he had this, but also that he had carried this his whole life, and that he never thought that, they always thought that it was just like, how some people have discoloration of their hair. That's it. So I have so many things, but my goal is that I don't really hold on to them because they're not mine. So it gets to a point where, I've had spirits take me to their house because I used to drive to people's houses, do like home parties and seances. And I had one guy take me to his house, and I had a Jeep at the time. So he decided that he was going to take me up over the mountain road. And when I got to his family's house and I told them, all they did was start laughing and said that that was his favorite road and that they couldn't believe he made me go, basically on a class 4 road. So, I've gone on plenty of adventures with spirits, and I have so many stories that I have no doubt they're real. I actually built my business. I personally live in a town of 500 people. And the bigger town where I have offices now has about 5,000 people, I think. So I built my business by word of mouth. And then I had a person who's big in the crystal world come to my house for a reading because of word of mouth. And then he introduced me to a publisher. And all of my stuff was through a back door, and it was because I shared my services with people. So I had a book contract for Jump Girl before I had even written it. I had only done blogs, and I met with the publisher. And when I did, I told him my story. And then I connected him with one of his beloved dead, and he was making calls to his publishing house that same time while I was there. So all of my work is confirmation for me. It's family reunions. And I always start my spirit communication sessions by first creating sacred space. And I do it in a really simple way. I just have people take a few deep breaths, letting go of their everyday worries. And then I call in my spirit guide, my doorman who work with me on the other side, and then their guests. I do it like a phone call, basically, because they sit down with me and I'm like, well, who are you here to see? And they tell me who they're there to see. And I basically put out a request to that spirit. And to be quite honest, I've never had anybody really say no. But I consider myself a healer above everything else. So I don't do haunted houses. I do haunted houses if I'm helping somebody who has a problem. I don't do tours. I don't do that kind of stuff. I work primarily as a healer, and I've had other mediums send people to me because I work a lot with people who've lost children, people who, because I'm a healer and Reiki master as well, I mix all of that together. So sometimes people who start coming to see me for spirit communication might then work with me for healing to help them through some of that loss. And when I do readings for people, I'll say that most people think of me as one of their best friends. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. It's the truth. People I believe that I love folk. I love everyday people. And I don't care if you're rich. I don't care if you're poor. I don't care where you're at. I just like people as people. And so I approach my reading style as it's very intimate. I will give people real details, and very seldom do people have to ask me questions. But I also do it in a way that's compassionate. I look for your way around hardship. I'm trying to give people. I have therapists who've asked me to go work in their building. I have worked in a therapist building before because they were like, "You can do with clients what we can't do in 8 months," and it's because I can be like, "Oh, this is it." Like, especially like I've worked a lot with vets because my dad was a vet, so that's a very special thing to me. So, and part of that is that growing up with somebody who had traumatic brain injury and PTSD, I have not only a compassionate understanding about it, but I also can sometimes bring up things that they're feeling that they can't bring up themselves, but I can say it because I can see it and I also understand it. So, I hope that helped. I kind of talked around in a circle, but I see myself as a healer in all things.
That's a beautiful story. It really is. And it's been a lovely journey, hasn't it?
Yes.
Let me ask, when you read, okay, one of the things that you notice, especially about, and not pointing a finger, but just at people, but just something I've noticed, like some people read like a used car salesman sells a car. How do you read?
Well, first of all, I won't read for anybody like over the radio or over anything like that because I feel like my work is too personal. I think of myself when I'm doing spirit communication, I think of myself as a guest at other people's family reunions. And I always start my spirit communication sessions by first creating sacred space. And I do it in a really simple way. I just have people take a few deep breaths, letting go of their everyday worries. And then I call in my spirit guide, my doorman who work with me on the other side, and then their guests. I do it like a phone call, basically, because they sit down with me and I'm like, well, who are you here to see? And they tell me who they're there to see. And I basically put out a request to that spirit. And to be quite honest, I've never had anybody really say no. But I consider myself a healer above everything else. So I don't do haunted houses. I do haunted houses if I'm helping somebody who has a problem. I don't do tours. I don't do that kind of stuff. I work primarily as a healer, and I've had other mediums send people to me because I work a lot with people who've lost children, people who, because I'm a healer and Reiki master as well, I mix all of that together. So sometimes people who start coming to see me for spirit communication might then work with me for healing to help them through some of that loss. And when I do readings for people, I'll say that most people think of me as one of their best friends. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. It's the truth. I believe that I love folk. I love everyday people. And I don't care if you're rich. I don't care if you're poor. I don't care where you're at. I just like people as people. And so I approach my reading style as it's very intimate. I will give people real details, and very seldom do people have to ask me questions. But I also do it in a way that's compassionate. I look for your way around hardship. I'm trying to give people, I have therapists who've asked me to go work in their building. I have worked in a therapist building before because they were like, you can do with clients what we can't do in 8 months. And it's because I can be like, oh, this is it. Like, especially like I've worked a lot with vets because my dad was a vet. So that's a very special thing to me. So, and part of that is that growing up with somebody who had traumatic brain injury and PTSD, I have not only a compassion and understanding about it, but I also can sometimes bring up things that they're feeling that they can't bring up themselves, but I can say it because I can see it and I also understand it. So, I hope that helped. I kind of talked around in a circle, but I see myself as a healer in all
No,
things.
it makes sense from what we've seen of your path. I mean, it all just kind of goes into one. I always like to think of it as the ocean. It goes
It
in and
does.
it ebbs and flows. And I have noticed our gifts do too. It's like all of a sudden you'll receive so many more people coming who need mediumship, who need that connection. And then all of a
Yes.
sudden it will switch to those who are confused about their own life path, right? Or something about it. All righty. What piece of advice or, what can you tell someone who is new? Being a teacher, I'm sure that you have a handle on, what they need or because it's very different than what you want. What you want is everything all at once. And we know, Sally, it's a journey. It is a journey. And some people make this journey and they never truly receive what they want because it's meant to be in multiple lifetimes. But for you, what advice could you give to someone coming into the field that wants to be a healer in some way?
And I tell this to all of my students is I tell them, take the words maybe, kind of, and think so out of your vocabulary when it comes to having a spiritual experience. Because people will do this all the time. They'll be like, I think I might have seen my grandmother standing in the corner. And I'm like, what is actually weirder that you spontaneously decided in your mind that you were going to create a figment of your grandmother standing in the corner or your dead grandmother standing in the corner? So I tell people, like, if we air our mind or gear our mind toward believing that what we're experiencing is real, so we take the doubt words out and we replace that and we say, I just saw my grandmother, then our body will respond. And we will know by the way that our body feels whether, yeah, I just saw my grandmother, or no, that wasn't right. If it doesn't feel right, we know. But that's my suggestion to people is take those words out. If you say, I might have had a visit from my brother, instead say, I had a visit from my brother, and see how it sits in your body. I think that people will find that just in that one little move that they start having more experiences.
Well, Sally, it's really interesting that you brought that up, and I'm glad you did, because the number one hit that we get from what I consider professional cynics is that those words are used, I feel. And what it does, it number one, like you said, it takes away that connection that you could have, right? Because you're putting doubt. And universal killer of psychic abilities is to have doubt in
Yep.
yourself and your guides, right? Your spirits.
Right.
But with cynics, and I don't look, everybody should be cynical to an extent, but I'm talking about the ones like going back to Houdini.
Right.
If you will remember, was just hell
A
bent on
huge
destroying
cynic.
any psychic.
Yes.
Oh, well, and he was hell-bent on destroying psychics because remember with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and I know you know this story, but his wife was an automatic writer, right? So
Yes.
when she did her thing for him, she wrote in English, and he said there was no way that his mother would do that she spoke another language,
That I can comment on that actually. So I do communicate with spirits that didn't speak English, and I always know that they didn't speak English, but there's because it's telepathic, I am hearing them in English, but at some point they'll be talking to me and I will say to their loved ones, I'll be like, did your parent or did your loved one not speak English? And they'll be like, no, they didn't. I said, oh, I can tell. And I hear it in English, because that's the language I speak. But it has always got like this weird accent to it. And it's not a sound accent, it's like a vibrational accent that lets me know like this was not their actual language. So there's a translation going on. So her being able to do automatic writing in English, that's because the language she spoke.
That's a good point. We are all different. Like I hear another language, and what I do is I write it down phonetically if I need to. Like this one woman wanted to know about her past life, and I always hate it when you see them as a different sex if they're not on this journey, because a lot of people don't understand this, right? So she wanted to know about her past life and how she died. And so I saw her on the battlefield in World War I, and I knew it was World War I because I'm an astral projector. I see things like in real time, right? And I knew that she was German. I'm hearing German, but I also see a doughboy running that way. And they call them doughboys because of their outfits, their uniforms. And then all of a sudden, I heard a German word, and I wrote it down phonetically. And now it's so easy to get translations. And what it meant was my tombstone, because she wanted to go back to where she died. So I heard, but it works differently with all of us. And I am absolutely with you. For some people, they hear it in English because it's like your spirit is translating it for you.
It's the same thing. It's like an obsession.
Well, it isn't. Oh, that's a good way to put it, isn't it? And it's from the get-go. It's from. And let me ask, how was it for you? Because we're the other, and it's so obvious. People know it from the time we're children. Was it ever difficult for you because of
No, actually, it's crazy actually to say that, but it really wasn't. My family is really charismatic. So my family was poor, like my great grandmother built her house by herself in a day with a friend, because I can go on to it's in my book. And she raised my father and his brothers. So while she was my great grandmother, she was my grandmother. But because everybody called her Gram. She was village Gram and took care of so many people that our family was very well loved. And the travelers are storytellers. So most of my family members are storytellers too. So we have really good charisma. And while we were we leaned into it one way or another. So it was kind of like, I remember being in 7th grade and having kids call me weird. And I just looked at him and I said, well, why would I want to be like everybody else? And so I've had really, really strong charisma in my life and a really strong sense of self. So being weird was something I kind of always liked. And I had the charisma to make me not an outcast. So,
well, I will say that, I grew up in West Virginia. And,
very different.
It was different, but it was also good. I was like you. I really didn't care. I've never cared.
Yeah.
And not to put. My granddaughter is a cheerleader, and so no shade on that. But for me, when I was growing up, I looked over there and I thought, no, I would not be happy, right, with that. And they had their own stressors. There's a lot of stress in being
so
popular.
Interestingly enough, my mom's family, while my father's family is where my gifts are from, and that's northern White Mountains, so the northern Appalachian mountain range. And then my mom's family is all from Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, Tennessee. So, I spent every summer of my life pretty much as a child going to Maryland and West Virginia and Pennsylvania. So I think it was interesting because I did see that there was, maybe because New Hampshire's motto was live free or die, people didn't really care as much what you did. Do you know what I mean? They were like, whatever. Much.
Well, thank you so much, and that is appreciated. I'm going to end tonight with a little teaser. I am working on, as you all know, that follow me, a documentary about Appalachian granny women called There's Magic in These Mountains, and this is just a teaser from that. And this is, so far, it is shaping up to be a really amazing documentary. I have some of the most well-versed in the art, if you will, of Granny Woman magic, who will be in this. And their voices I'm excited to preserve in this particular film. But what I'm extremely excited about is preserving the stories of our Appalachian granny women, because we are losing those as each generation passes. There are fewer and fewer people who keep the ways of the mountains, and these are very magical ways, and so we want to preserve as much of that as we can. And so, as you know, always say, stay curious. Until next time.